Hey guys, this is God of Politics. Welcome back to a brand new video, but before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But in today's video, I am talking about the results that we had from the New York City mayoral primary that took place last night, when we had results that started to come in. And results have actually been coming in pretty quickly, considering that in the 2020 election, they took over a month to come in, but we do have results, 83% reporting according to the New York Times. I think it's more than that in in-person votes, but we do have some absentee ballots that won't be counted for another week or so, and then they start counting the second choice votes because, again, this is a ranked choice primary. But as you can see here, Eric Adams has 31.7% of the vote, 253,000 votes, which is quite high turnout. We're at 798,000, which is more than the 2013 primary, plus we have over 100,000 absentee ballots. So maybe you don't reach a million, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but regardless, it is still quite a high primary, high turnout primary, I should say. But you can see here that Maya Wiley came second with 22.3% of the vote. Catherine Garcia came third with 19.5% of the vote. Andrew Yang did very, very poorly with 11.7% of the vote. Now, comparing that to my prediction, I would consider my prediction to be reasonably accurate. I got Eric Adams coming in first with approximately a 10-point lead, basically 100% accurate. I did have Catherine Garcia actually being in second. She is now in third, but when we do look at these absentee ballots, we can see here that these absentee ballots are coming from areas that Catherine Garcia did very well. And to show you just how much of a correlation there is, you can see here that on this precinct map, these green areas are areas where Catherine Garcia is currently winning. And when we look at where the absentee ballots are coming from, they're coming from areas she's doing very well, whereas you can see these light spots in parts of Brooklyn, these light spots in parts of the Bronx. These are areas where Eric Adams is doing very well. So what I do think is going to happen as a result of this is that Catherine Garcia is going to overtake Maya Wiley and come in second place in the first round. Maya Wiley is going to fall back to third. And I did actually have Yang getting more votes than Wiley in the first round, but I did have Wiley getting further than Andrew Yang. So in the first round, I did have Yang overperforming by about 5%. I had Maya Wiley underperforming, probably when it's all said and done, by about 5% as well. Scott Stringer, I overestimated. Diane Morales, I got about perfect. Sean Donovan and Ray McGuire, I overestimated by 1% or 2%. So looking ahead to the second round, how accurate I'm going to be, I actually think that I may end up being quite accurate because it's probably going to end up being Eric Adams winning, and then Catherine Garcia coming second, Maya Wiley coming third, Andrew Yang coming fourth, Scott Stringer coming fifth, as I did predict. So I've gotten the top 5 correct in terms of what place they have come in. As for the percent of the vote, I think that an Eric Adams victory by 6% over Catherine Garcia is actually a very likely scenario. Now, a lot of people were saying that Maya Wiley might actually come in second place as a result, but really, given these absentee ballot results, I don't see that happening, given the fact that she doesn't really have that many concentrated areas of support. If you look at the Democratic primary by Assembly District, we can see here she did well in a lot of these gentrified areas of Queens and Brooklyn areas like Astoria, Williamsburg, Greenpoint, if you're from New York City. Whereas Adams, of course, won every Assembly District in the Bronx, won a decent chunk of them in Brooklyn and Queens, and about half of them in Staten Island. And he did well in the Harlem area, Washington Heights up here with 71st and 72nd, Harlem and East Harlem at 70th and 68th, respectively. But you can see here that there are many different things that you can extrapolate from this, which I will get to in a second. But just to finish up on how accurate my predictions are going to end up being, I think while you can't get everything 100% right, I think that I would consider this prediction reasonably accurate. I think that it is likely to be Eric Adams beating Catherine Garcia by a modest amount, 6% I would consider modest. Especially considering some of the polls that we had. But I do think that my prediction was generally quite accurate, but I guess we can't really speak too much on it until we get the final results, which may not be for a while. Now, as for the district attorney race, which I did predict, I predicted Alvin Bragg to win narrowly. He did win narrowly. Now, We do have some results still to report. Maybe that changes the result, but as of now, I don't see it changing. I also predicted the comptroller race. I actually predicted Corey Johnson winning this race. In polls, he was winning by up to 25 percentage points, even with only about a poll about a week ago had him leading by over 20 percentage points. Some polls back in March had him leading by like 50 percentage points. And so this was really a shock, I would say. I personally didn't think that Brad Lander was going to win, even though he had a lot of these endorsements. I said that he was going to do decent, that I did say that Corey Johnson was going to win comfortably. That didn't happen. Brad Lander seems to have gotten a lot of that name recognition from the endorsements and he was able to beat Corey Johnson, who's the Speaker of the New York City Council. Now, the final race I predicted was the Republican primary, where I did predict Curtis Lewa to win. He won very, very handily. He only had about 50,000 votes versus 700,000 or 800,000 for the Democrats, but still quite a positive result for Curtis Lewa there. Now, there are many other things that we can extrapolate from this, and I'm going to kind of try to extrapolate this to national politics because I think that you can do that in some sense. And I'm just going to talk about this a little bit because you can see here that Eric Adams did very, very well in the Bronx, and the Bronx is 50% Hispanic. Now, if you do polls and you do polls about issues like Black Lives Matter, more policing, Hispanic voters consistently poll much more pro-police and much more anti-BLM than any other group in the Democratic electorate. And that really seems to have shown in the results here because Adams is, I would say, the most pro-police candidate of the Democratic candidates here. And he was able to win amongst Hispanic voters, but he also won amongst black voters. So what does that show? Well, it shows that, there's been a lot of these movements to defund the police, all of this stuff, but really it actually isn't popular in the communities itself. And so that is why, you didn't see someone like Maya Wiley winning these communities or someone like Diane Morales. And while she did get a decent chunk of the vote in some of these precincts, really, she didn't really get any substantial amounts because Wiley got 22% overall. But if we look at these black precincts here, these black heavy precincts, Bed-Stuy, Flatbush, these communities in Brooklyn, Wiley is not getting the numbers that she did overall because she did better with, richer, more gentrified folks in the Brooklyn area, the Queens area. Catherine Garcia did very well with white voters in Manhattan. And so what it does show is that really black and Hispanic voters don't seem to be, anti-police in any form, at least based on this primary, because in 2020, of course, Joe Biden did lose a substantial amount of support from Hispanic voters. And you can attribute that, in my view, at least partially to a lot of the Black Lives Matter stuff that went on. I'm not speaking personally on what I view about Black Lives Matter, but what I'm saying is that their views on it may have pushed some of them away from the Democratic Party, and what it now did in this primary is push a lot of these voters to Eric Adams, who is a more pro-police candidate. Now, there's other things we can extrapolate from this at a more local level, I would say, and that is the divide between the establishment and the anti-establishment. You can see here that in these whiter areas of Manhattan, Catherine Garcia really wiped the floor, and a lot of those votes are coming from someone like Stringer, who really underperformed. Now, Stringer is a more establishmentarian figure, but he's also very progressive. Catherine Garcia is an establishmentarian figure, but she is not progressive. Now, notice that Maya Wiley didn't win these areas. The votes went from Stringer after he had his scandal. They went from Stringer to Garcia. They didn't go from Stringer to Wiley, who is more ideologically similar. They went to a candidate like Garcia. Now, that is the real focus. A lot of these voters aren't voting based necessarily on ideology. They're voting based on the establishment. That is why someone like Eric Adams can win in the Bronx, but also AOC can win in the Bronx. But, that also does, in theory, undermine the point of pro-policing and all that kind of stuff, because AOC, of course, is represented in this district, but then you can counter that with the fact that she actually underperformed Biden in a district that is 50% Hispanic, which is not a good feat for someone to be underperforming Biden in a district that was heavily Hispanic, which I don't really think there are many cases of that. Or maybe she overperformed by about 1%, but really not a good performance at all. But really, you can look at that and really see the anti-establishment versus establishment thing. And I think that it's very clear from this, because you wouldn't necessarily assume that Garcia would get a lot of Stringer's votes when you take a first glance at it. But then she did end up getting a lot of those votes. She won a lot of white voters in the Manhattan area. You see that she won a lot of whiter areas of Brooklyn. She won whiter areas of Staten Island. She won whiter areas of the Bronx. And it was really polarized by race. And that is compounded, by a lot of the things that we're seeing with Adams doing well with black voters here. Yang, of course, did very well with Orthodox Jewish voters. That's another thing that you have to note on a completely separate note. Yang did very well with the Orthodox Jewish voters, getting, upwards of 80% in some of these precincts. But you can see the candidate that came second in a lot of these precincts is actually Eric Adams. So when you have the transfer of votes in the ranked choice voting, it's likely that many of those Yang votes, rather than going to Garcia with the kind of team up they did, they may actually go to Adams. And that's why I'm so bullish on Adams actually winning this primary, as I predicted to begin with. Now, while many of Maya Wiley's voters may not go to Eric Adams, are they really going to go to Catherine Garcia? Maybe they do, because Maya Wiley did do quite well in these gentrified areas, which are generally whiter. Of course, there are exceptions to this, but they're generally whiter areas, because, of course, Maya Wiley did do well in some areas of Harlem, some areas of Washington Heights. Those are not white areas, but she did do well in more affluent, gentrified areas where you have a lot of progressive voters. And so, overall, what we can see from this primary is that it is a win for multiple different people, really, because Eric Adams is a moderate. That's a win for moderates at the mayoral level, but Democrats won the comptroller race in what I would say is an upset. They won a lot of these city council races, and they won a lot of other races as well. District attorney is another race that they seem to have won with a progressive, and so, of course, actually, progressives also won with a socialist, self-proclaimed socialist, in Buffalo. They also beat the incumbent mayor in Rochester. So progressives did win some races. They also lost some races, but Maya Wiley overperformed. So even if you look at the mayoral race, you can say the progressives got a win there. So overall, I wouldn't necessarily say this is a win or a loss for the progressive or moderate wing, but these are just the results that we're looking at. Once we get final results, I'll make another video about this, seeing if there's anything more we can extrapolate about this. But it is quite an interesting election to look at. I'm from New York City myself, and this was quite a fascinating election. It's the most focus there's really ever been on New York City for a mayoral race in quite some time, because New York City is a safe area, New York State is a safe state. Not much focus that usually goes on it, but it was quite interesting to see how much focus there was on this primary, and we can see that we have the results here. So thank you all for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But again, guys, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys later.